Tonight's event is part of the Cinematheque retrospective, The Pleasure of Seeing, the Sublime Cinema of Max Ophüls, on now until March 15th. Featuring a number of digital restorations, this series is an opportunity to appreciate the incredibly opulent visual aesthetic of these films, as well as the deeper recurring themes of temporality and mortality. For more information about the other films screening as part of this program, please visit tiff.net/Ophüls. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's presenter, Jutta Brendemühl. Jutta is the program curator at the Goethe-Institut Toronto and director of the board and at the European Film Festival here in Toronto. She holds a master's degree in English literature and writes on film and media arts, international cultural relations, and arts education. Previously, she worked at Harbourfront Centre, and she has collaborated with the likes of Bernardo Bertolucci, Robert Rauschenberg, and Pina Bausch. Brendemühl is the founding curator of Goethe films at TIFF Lightbox. If you haven't gone, please check it out. And a fellow of the Toronto Arts Council Cultural Leaders Lab. Please join me in welcoming Jutta Brendemühl.
This is not as easy as I thought. I have stage fright, so I don't want to give this presentation. You probably don't want to hear it. Seems like now would be a good time to part ways. This is not my talk yet, by the way. This is actually how Max Ophüls opened a mind-blowing lecture performance called Thoughts on Film in Frankfurt to a crowd of the Frankfurt Chamber of Commerce, no less. That probably explains what I just said. 2 years before his death. You won't expect it after my delivery, but he was an extremely funny, charming, captivating showman. Ophüls was also famous for his love of details and digressions, and I could probably do him justice in that. I'll start my talk with a confession. I did not quite walk into this retrospective an ardent Ophülsian, but I'm certainly leaving an utterly smitten admirer. My thanks to Tiff, to James, Keith, Jessica, Christoph, and the entire team, and I hope you will be seduced with me by the sublime Max Ophüls. Tiff generously gave me carte blanche to talk about any Ophüls film in this series, and I chose this one over the famous Madame de, the one that critic Andrew Sarin called the most perfect film, and also over my personal favorite, Lola Montes. Why? Liebelei is Ophüls' last German film ever, unfortunately. Shot in the winter of 1932-33. It premiered in Vienna on February 24th, 1933, so we're just days away from an anniversary, and in Leipzig and Berlin a few weeks later. Within that short time frame lies the blackest and most fateful day in German, if not world history, Hitler being made Reichskanzler on January 30th, 1933. A prescient Ophüls fled Germany 8 weeks after Hitler came to power, 2 weeks after his premiere. Feel free to ignore everything I'm about to say and watch this film as the romantic fin de siècle tragedy that it is. And you might have seen that outside. I actually found the original premiere program booklet, so to speak, with a lot of beautiful images from Berlin 1933, printed it out for you to take away outside. But I will try to tease out the film's underrated, subtle, subversive, but never cynical, political undertones. The story in brief: Vienna before World War I. Opera glasses falling off a theater balcony intertwine the fates of 4 young people. Christine meets Lieutenant Fritz, Mitzi meets Theo. Fritz ends his affair with Baroness Eggerdorf, but too late, the Baron knows. What ensues is one pending tragedy of failed dreams and lack of agency over one's life for everyone involved, like Lola Montes and other Ophüls. Ophüls will always circle back to Liebelei in his career. That's also why this film is so important to me. You'll find traces of it in Madame de and Unknown Woman, for example. His 1940 Maya link to Sarajevo is a companion piece to the political argument I'm making here. If you catch it in this retrospective, remember the pointers I will give you about militarism, the imperial system, and love destroyed by rigid codes. Many of Ophüls' films were literary adaptations of Zweig, Goethe, Maupassant. German director Dominik Graf said about the particular Arthur Schnitzler-Max Ophüls relationship we witness here and in La Ronde, Ophüls wrapped Schnitzler's harsh Freudian truth in pretty garlands. He sweetened the bitter medicine of Schnitzler's ice-cold emotional massacres, but was, in the end, no less merciless in his message. So true. Note that it was Ophüls, actually, who moved Liebelei's setting from civil to military life. As we will see in the decidedly different beginning of the film compared to the play. The ending, too, Ophüls changed a bit from the original play, but I don't want to give you any spoilers, so we won't go there. You can ask me afterwards. Liebelei, Ophüls' fifth film, was his first big hit. It's the last film the Jewish director got to make before leaving, an adaptation of a Jewish author's still often staged and read play on many German bookshelves, and in schools you will find this famous little yellow edition. Europe's downfall did not begin in 1933, but at least around Schnitzler's time, probably well before. Liebelei takes us to the perceived height of European influence and world power. Imperialism, colonialism, the latter briefly hinted at in Liebelei in the second half. Listen closely, there's one sentence from Theo. Ophüls often chose period films. Please note that all of his films were commissioned, but he very much made the stories and the characters his own. And I wonder whether that returning to period material was a sneaky way of affording himself artistic liberties for allegorical commentary, or a seemingly safe haven for the man who knew the vagaries of being an outsider in a very publicly visible industry, having been fired from the Burgtheater Vienna as an actor as early as 1927 for being Jewish. So let's read Liebelei as a time-shifted metaphor of the early 1930s for the moral crisis of a society torn between rigid traditions and the freedoms of democratic change, which the Weimar Republic promised, attempted before being hijacked by Hitler. So which of these signs of the times do we find in Liebelei? Many. I'll point out these four interrelated elements. The monarchy, and with it the medieval aristocratic code of honor. Military, a glorified militarist attitude that pervaded all public life. A class system that was a largely impermeable upstairs-downstairs split, and a relentlessly normative society throughout all classes that did not ask about circumstance or chance or merit. The duel we'll see in the film, for example, is not for love, but due to social convention, shrouded in secrecy, conceit, and pretense. All of the above. Class distinctions, a monarchical hierarchy, pervading militarism, and rigid social codes we get right at the beginning of Liebelei, where we find ourselves at the opera. The place where the different levels of society intersected in public, or at least were together in one public space, and where Ophüls, the theater man, is at home. We'll watch a quick clip.
Der Kaiser. Ja, gib mir das Glas. Christine, geh, gib mir das Glas.
So the Kaiser, that wasn't him, breathlessly awaited, isn't shown here. Absences were a favorite stylistic tool of Ophüls's, this one the biggest omission of all, an invisible emperor. Perhaps a tongue-in-cheek, irreverent Ophüls dares to poke fun with the, der Kaiser, the emperor, pointing towards an empty figurehead. It feels like waiting for Godot, visually substituted by two giggling shopgirls, no less. You likely know the melody you just heard as the German national anthem, and it is. But here it actually is the original Austrian emperor's anthem. Gott erhalte Franz den Kaiser, may God keep forever our Emperor Franz. History had other plans. The monarchy is on display in this clip and throughout in a way, if not visually, then orally. After the two girls have nearly caused a riot, and Ophüls is bitingly humorous as that uptight commander scribbles outraged notes in his little book, scandalous, scandalous. Street smart Mitzi, who I love in this film, explains the military hierarchy, its demarcations, and its implicit powers to innocent Christine and to us.
Freund, sieht auch gut aus, nicht? Das ist ein Leutnant. Woran siehst du denn das? Weil er nur einen Stern hat. Wie du dich auskennst mit Chargen. Das lernt man halt mit der Zeit. Also pass auf. Ein Stern, Leutnant. 2 Stern, Oberleutnant. 3 Stern, Leutnant. Und 4, General. Okay. 4 gibt's doch gar nicht. Dann kommen schon wieder die Goldfragen. Aber das ist nichts für uns.
That's not for us. Yeah. Ophüls knows what he's talking about when it comes to sets and costumes. His father was a tailor with 2 stores who sold uniforms. And soon Max himself would wear the French army uniform and run anti-Nazi broadcasts from across the border. Watch out throughout the film how especially the military men, but also the noblemen, put on or take on gloves and hats and helmets and have attendants with boxes just for their insignia. Everything in this film is codified, yet Ophüls makes it look natural and effortless. And there's beautiful music. The social order is in danger when there's fun and dancing, and there's always dancing in Ophüls. You will see 2 central, sort of same but different waltzes in the film. Keep an eye on Fritz dancing with Christine to a jukebox in a Viennese cafe, and Fritz dancing with his Baroness lover in a ballroom to live orchestral music. Look at their posture, their expressions, their glances. And if you're interested in filmmaking, and Ophüls was a master, how Ophüls cleverly circles both couples with the help of mirrors. It's the sum of those small things and object manipulations that unlock the subtleties of Ophüls' films. The lost key, the misplaced cap, the handkerchief she offers him. Ophüls is political if you choose to read between the lines. He likes to toy with interferences, the falling opera glasses we saw, but in the end, the social order does not break down. We are left with the residue of classism, militarism, and the foreshadowing of Nazism. The downfall of Christine's and Fritz's love is a misguided sense of being wronged, the violent defense of one's honor, the belief in satisfaction, following even nonsensical demands in the service of duty, the glorification of chauvinism, gender-based, class-based, the irrational reverence of ranks and noble titles. The latter were outlawed in Austria after the war. No Baron Egerdorf anymore, due to what we will see tonight. And all this was also the downfall of Central Europe. What does Ophüls see as an antithesis? Interestingly, I thought diplomacy is explicitly mentioned in Liebelei, defined by a soldier, no less, as one antidote to outdated systemic patterns. He says, diplomacy is not a category of weaponry. What could have saved us? The relative serenity of the petty bourgeoisie as represented by Christine's mellow father, enjoyment of life's simple fleeting pleasures like Mitzi shows us, social and emotional leeway within bourgeois limits as Fritz tries to carve out for himself. Ophüls the filmmaker shows us the issues, but gives no answers. He is not a revolutionary, although in real life, his son called him a committed Marxist. Surprisingly, it is happy-go-lucky friend Lieutenant Theo, who openly challenges the system with what amounts to a pacifist manifesto. And I'm just in love with him in this film and also with the actor, I have to say. Theo's last name, by the way, is Kaiser, the emperor. Don't want to overinterpret Schnitzler or Ophüls' subversive impulses here, but it's not a coincidence. So, Lieutenant Theo Kaiser says late in the film, 2 people facing each other, shooting at each other, it's senseless, just senseless. Every shot that isn't fired as a last resort in self-defense is murder. Given all of the above, I have no idea how this film snuck by the censors. References to God had to be removed from the famous romantic sleigh ride scene that you will see, even before the premiere. Ophüls' name, alongside the Jewish author and screenwriters, were removed from the opening credits, but not the marquee. I actually looked closely at the two photos I showed you previously from the Berlin opening. It says ein Film von Max Ophüls. Film Museum Munich director Stefan Drösler dug a bit deeper when he did the restoration. The Viennese census list noted a length of 2,562 meters. When the film was presented to the German censors 3 days later, 3 minutes were missing. We don't know what. The Austrian Film Archive has a nitrate copy that seems to have deliberately cut the Emperor's Anthem at the beginning, perhaps after World War II, when the anthem was outlawed. End of quote. Whatever could be remedied was remedied in the 2018 restoration, including redesigned and reinserted credits, but some parts of what Ophüls created and what he handed in are lost. Only one Ophüls film can be found on the censor list of the 1930s. Ironically, his light escapist comedy Laughing Heirs, and it's recommended viewing, by the way, in this retro. It's really enjoyable, and I would have done a talk for that as well. Why was it censored? Too much alcohol consumption on screen. Interesting priorities in troubled times. Liebelei was censored in 1945 by the Allied Military Administration, exactly because of this portrayal of affairs of honor and the dueling scene. There's a moving report by a young dissident who saw Liebelei in Berlin in 1943 that I just briefly wanted to mention. She found, and she describes it elaborately, she found the screening listed in the paper by a local cinema and couldn't believe her luck while sitting there looking over her shoulder for the Gestapo to show up and arrest the 20 daring cinema goers. The film managed to screen under the radar. Things were never quite as straightforward as we often think in those times. I was surprised, for example, to read that in 1935, Ophüls did return to his hometown of Saarbrücken from France to vote for his bilingual home province of Saarland in the southwest of Germany to join France. 90% voted for it to remain in Germany, and it does to this day. Ophüls used this opportunity to take his parents and sisters across the border to Metz, not to return. Their flourishing stores had to be sold for pennies, and we see his former home on a tour there, the Oppenheimer home in the middle. In his biography, Ophüls credits my somewhat frivolous attitude towards political issues to being a Saarländer, tossed back and forth between Germany and France, and bombarded during World War I. So that was 12-year-old Max Oppenheimer's first encounter with military force and violent death, and I wonder what the relationship is here to decisions he made. Where does that leave us with Ophüls today? For a man who made over 24 movies in half a dozen countries, Max Ophüls remains oddly obscure in Germany, while he is part of the art house canon in France and North America. Only 8 years ago, German arts journalist Verena Lüken complained that many of Ophüls' films, especially the German ones, were not available on DVD. And I, for example, viewed last year's DVD release of Liebelei and Lola Montez, courtesy of Edition Filmmuseum and the Goethe-Institut. Thankfully, over the past few years, his films have been restored, as this retrospective so magnificently proves. Keeping his legacy alive is a work in progress 60 years after his death. I feel Ophüls was in so many ways ahead of his time, and we're still catching up with him. Perhaps his most lasting legacy we see is in other artists' work. Eyes Wide Shut with Cruise and Kidman is an adaptation of Schnitzler's Dream Story and an homage to Max Ophüls, whose floating camera Kubrick cherished. Highest of all, I would rate Ophüls, Kubrick said. He has an exceptional flair for sniffing out good subjects, and his camera moved through walls. Ophüls' US noir thriller Caught is on Martin Scorsese's famous list, films you need to see to know anything about film. And he said, there are certain styles I had trouble with at first, like some of Ophüls' films. It took me till my 30s to get the earrings of Madame de, but I didn't have trouble with Caught. And I'd say you can surely see some Ophüls in The Age of Innocence and other works. Godard loved Le Plaisir, Truffaut volunteered to assist on Lola Montez. Ophüls, noted his friend Truffaut, is less interested in the core plot moments than the in-between. Remember that in Liebelei, when you don't see the duel scene, you don't actually see the final event, but you still get everything you need and more. Jacques Demy dedicated his 1961 Lola to Lola Montez, and 2001 The Deep End with Tilda Swinton was a remake of The Reckless Moment. You find traces of Ophüls in Wes Anderson, I'd say The Grand Budapest Hotel, or Sofia Coppola. The Beguiled comes to mind. Paul Thomas Anderson is an avowing fan. Seeing Liebelei, you might recall Anderson's Phantom Thread from last year. I saw it here at TIFF. Please note how the vast majority of these influences are American or French. German director Dominique Graf, I mentioned before, he is a steadfast fan. He said, "The one genuine German language giant of subtle desire and cruel romantic doubt, we did have him, Max Ophüls. His films remind us that the deepest insights into love as a commodity were created in the German language." If you watch Graf's Beloved Sisters, you will see and feel that Ophüls touch. You see Ophüls' camera innovations in Fassbinder, and God knows I should have put him in here, I forgot. Lola Montez was among Fassbinder's all-time top three films. And the circling, the famous Ophüls circling and tracking, camera tracking, was probably also introduced through Fassbinder's famous cinematographer, the late Michael Ballhaus, who as a teen snuck onto the set of Lola and fell in love with film. If you keep looking, you'll find more Max Ophüls in the history and the future of filmmaking. Perhaps even in Cuarón's long takes on Roma, his circling interest in maids rather than masters, or Pawlikowski's passionate love story between two people of different backgrounds set across the difficult politics of 1950s Europe in his currently Oscar-nominated Cold War, playing at TIFF as we speak. The most relevant political impact Max Ophüls left us with, I believe, is through his son. We just saw him on a poster there. Oscar winner Marcel Ophüls, a filmmaker himself. Marcel, 6 at the time, recalls how Liebelei was playing in Berlin when they left. The now 93-year-old remembers how when he was 13, the family fled further across the Pyrenees. And years later, Marcel went in search of this transit place, and I'm consciously alluding, of course, to Christian Petzold's luminous film Transit from last year that depicts exactly that fate, that time, and that geography via Marseille and Lisbon. Eventually I saw a landscape, says Marcel, that I remembered from the train window as a boy. He bought a house overlooking that mountain range across which the Ophülses had fled and where he still lives, in between. In his own films, Marcel Ophüls often examines the nature of political power, from the Nuremberg trials to the Vietnam War. "I'm not obsessed," he once countered criticism of his intense political single-mindedness. "I just happen to think that the Holocaust was the worst thing that happened in the 20th century." I want to leave you with one twofold thought. What happened next? For once, concretely to the film's artists right after, and from a wider angle to film and culture in Germany. The actor's fate in this case, from soirees with Hitler to death, is of course revealing, but it's frankly, it was so crazy and complex when I researched it that I'll put up some notes on our film blog, German Film at Canada Tomorrow. There's postcards downstairs in the lobby, and you can find the link at the Goethe-Institut Toronto website, or if you Google it, it'll be there. I'll put it up around 10 o'clock. With many artists forced out by the Nazis, Germany experienced a painful gap in its culture making. Only a few returning from exile, such as writers Thomas Mann or Bert Brecht. Bert Brecht, who was just feted last year and at the Berlinale in new German films. Watching the films in this retrospective, the ones Ophüls made in Germany and the ones he made in France, elsewhere, and the US, and it has to be noted he made those with difficulties, but that's another talk, brought home to me again the depressing and detrimental insight that the disasters Germany caused stunted its cultural expression and growth for decades, if not impacting its filmmaking to this day. In this case, this is somewhat alleviated by the meaningful gesture that is the Max Ophüls Festival and we had 2 posters up a while ago. They give out an annual award with Ophüls' name on it, specifically to the next generation of German filmmakers, and that's some beautiful symbolism there. I'm not one for what-ifs normally, but here I can't help but wonder what if Ophüls and others hadn't been forced to leave. How many more beautiful, innovative, and critical films like Liebelei we might have seen? The answer is probably in this retrospective. Many. They just have different cultural flavors and did not come out of Germany and still need to come back to Germany. From Martina Müller's enlightening documentary, let's have Max Ophüls have the last word on the question of where and to whom he belongs. I hope you'll find Liebelei and this retrospective as fascinating and multi-layered as I do.
In Frankreich hielt man Max Ophüls für einen Österreicher, in der BRD galt er nach seiner Emigration als Franzose, in Hollywood nannte man ihn einen dickköpfigen Europäer. Nach seiner Nationalität befragt, antwortete er 1936 in Paris: Ich werde es morgen wissen. Max Ophüls in einem Radiointerview 1952:
Ich möchte aber nicht gerne überhaupt in meiner Arbeit national festgelegt werden. Ich glaube, bei all der Unrast, die mich in meinem Leben umgeben musste, so dass ich in vielen Ländern arbeiten musste, um weiter zu existieren, habe ich das große Glück gehabt, von verschiedenen Kulturquellen geformt zu werden.